Okay.
All right, well, the premise of the book, David Jones is here. Can you stick your head in, David, so I can see you? There we go.
Hi,
All right.
David.
Hey,
Okay.
Well, wow, lovely to see you all. I think you understand the book. The title does pretty much say it. The Angels of Christmas, Hearing God's Voice in Advent. This is a continuation of the theme that we've been following together, this listening for God's voice. And this is just a little bit different in that we're going to be considering how angels are the messengers for God. And they may not look like the ones that you're seeing now in the stores or in people's front lawns or in some of that more contemporary literature. They may be, and I hope that this will impel, like ask ourselves that question too: who have been the angels in our lives? Did they appear with wings and halos? If they did, that's amazing. But more likely, they've appeared in other ways to us, in ways that we may not have even known at the time. And I think that the gift of the book is that it allows us to put ourselves in the place of, say, Zechariah. When have we been told something that we found to be so ridiculous or outlandish or unbelievable that we were not able to take it in? Didn't mean we were disbelieving so much, just as we didn't have any context for that. And so, and then also the book helps us see this is not a new phenomenon, this idea of angel messengers, that this phenomenon has existed since we've been recording our history as a people of God. There have been all kinds of that, and not just in the Jewish tradition, in the Muslim tradition, in the and in the Christian tradition. We have angels have been. So I'd like to take a little bit of time just this morning for you to talk about what your David has taught a class on angels, so he probably has a wider knowledge of this, but for many of us, we may not have thought about this often, or we may have not really considered it. So I'm wondering if any of you would be willing to share about your own understanding of angels.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are cherubim and seraphim, are they angels? Are they related to angels? Or
In the way we've understood that Jewish folklore, yes, but
okay.
because of where they reside, right? Cherubim, seraphim reside with God in the
Okay.
Holy of Holies or whatever. And so we consider them, I've never seen a cherubim or a seraphim, and I only have the description that Isaiah gives us and some of the others, right? We have those descriptions, but it's hard to know, right? Whether they are or not. David, you might be able to expound on that.
not at the moment.
Not from it.
What did he say?
I'm gonna give
I
you the
will.
chance to let me know.
I'm
Okay.
still waking up.
That's good, that's fine. Anybody else? That's a great question though, and I think I've always lumped them together, whether that's accurate or not, because that's where we get, I think, the idea of wings for angels, right? Because they do describe them as being having, 6 sets of wings, for example. And also, I guess we hear about them, John's Revelation, right? St. John the Divine. We hear some descriptions of heavenly beings that we might call angels.
So there could be different categories of angels.
Class
Like
one,
a higher.
2, class 3, and so on.
And then there's the ones that appear in the movies.
Yes.
So
Okay.
Can we be?
that's a whole other class.
Can we all be angels?
Right?
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah.
Depends
Yeah.
on how you this
I said the word was kid.
This is that
I
slide,
believe the word was kid.
the sliding scale. Yeah. Yeah, amazing.
May I tell a story or make it short?
And as long as you speak up, so everyone can,
Okay.
yeah.
Who's talking?
Mother.
Maisie.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
My grandfather was ill, and
he had to get a copy of his writing that he had that was supposed to be in Columbia. They lived in Greenwood. And so my grandmother, and this was, in the days of cars that probably went 40 at the top. And so she left to go take it to Columbia, and it was pouring rain. It was a big storm. And she looked, and there was a lady, an old lady walking on the side of the road in that storm. And she thought, oh, what do I do? I don't have time. She had to get there by a certain time, and she was really worried about time, but she thought, I cannot leave that woman walking in the storm. So she stopped and picked her up and, asked her where she was going and could she take her. And so she told her where she needed to go, and she took her out of the way and took time. And when the lady got out of the car and leaned down at the window to tell her thank you, there was a halo around her. And it was ministering the angels unaware. It was very,
The thing, you
I
left
don't
me in
think so.
suspense.
That part, she didn't tell me.
Thank you. So I don't think this is a disbelieving group, is what I guess I'm getting at.
Well, I would go walking. My grandfather, Goldman in Ocala, we would, on most mornings, I would go with him and we'd walk down the street to the square. And before we would leave from his business, he would say, well, Bubala, that's what he called me. Do you think that we need an umbrella today? And I would say, I don't know. And he would say, well, let's ask. And he would say, so God, what are the angels sending us today? And he would say, we don't need the umbrella. And off we'd go. And some days he would say, they say we need an umbrella. And for years, I really thought he was talking to these angels, and he very well could have been. But well, it was just him, Tevye, but it was just him, the way, he would talk. And so I always sort of thought they were out there because he talked to them. And, I tend to now think more of the people that I know that I am sure are angels among us. Some are in that room right there, but, that they are just absolutely angels among us.
Thank you. Thank you.
I grew up with the knowledge that I had a guardian angel. And that has been, even today, something that I take comfort in.
And along those lines, our prayer as kids, angel of God, my guardian dear, God's love commits me here. Ever this day be at my side, to light and to guard, to rule and to guide.
I don't know, never heard that.
It's a Catholic
It's a
thing.
Catholic.
Oh, that would explain it.
That was Catholic school catechism.
I actually went to Catholic school for a while.
Well, that's an interesting idea, which we hadn't even really broached, this idea of a guardian angel as something that would send you protection. So that angels have different functions. Angels can, messengers, they can announce things. They can tell people what's going to happen. They can sometimes point toward our better selves, I think. You've heard that expression, our better angels. So something that's interior, right? That would point us towards a way of behaving, a way of being in the world. For example, Maisie, your story, showing kindness to someone else, to a stranger, right? And as we get through this, I have an angel story myself that I don't share very often because it's just that private, right? There's just some things that I just haven't shared. And I think we'll wait a couple of weeks till we get into that. But
You wait to see if we're gonna be.
yeah, you know, if you're worthy. It's mostly,
We'll all come back for sure to hear
it's mostly about me, bravery.
Well, let me tell one more.
Yeah, you tell
This-
one.
This was so meaningful to me, and I'm not sure it was an angel, but several years ago, I was involved in a prayer chain, and we took 10, 15-minute increments to pray continuously. So whenever I pray, if I can, typically I go to my garden because that's my very sacred, quiet place. And I got out there and I sat down, and I just remembered it was a very calm day. There was no wind. And before I pray, I always say, Lord, hear my prayer. So I did that, and I sat there and prayed for a good 10, 15 minutes. And at the end, I also say, Lord, hear my prayer. And about that time, from a wind chime at the top of my garden, I hear ding, ding, ding. There was absolutely no wind.
Mm.
There was a wind chime at the top of my
That
garden.
was your message, I heard.
I think that was the message. And was it an angel? Yeah.
May have been God himself.
I don't know. I don't want to go that far.
herself.
Sure, and
Or herself, yeah.
or,
Thank you.
if it's a Wonderful Life, maybe 3 angels got
Yeah.
their wings. I don't know.
Can I elaborate on my earlier question? Because it relates to what I think is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think God uses us in many different ways we don't even know, all this kind of thing. Doesn't have to be somebody flying around, you know, that's anointed by God, or whatever. We're all related to God. We all have a relationship to God, and God uses whether we know it or not, whether we would anyway. But I had an angel experience a few weeks ago, about a month ago, I guess, in Norwich shop. I told David about this last night, but I'll try to make it brief. But Kelly's and us were looking to go to a place called Churchill, Manitoba in February or March to see the Northern Lights. And I was in Norris one day. We were about ready to zip everything up. And I was in there, just somebody else was in there watching the shop. And some lady comes in and she's got she's got a Churchill, Manitoba sweatshirt on. And I started talking to her. I said, tell me about it. And so she pulls out her iPhone and shows me all these pictures of polar bears and Northern Lights. And she'd gone about this time, same time, October, a couple, 3 years ago. And so we came back, long story short, about 5 o'clock that afternoon, we had gotten the last 6 spots on this trip that we just came back from a couple of weeks ago, whatever. And I mean, that had to be an angel thing. You could say, well, it didn't make me go and do some good stuff or didn't bring the news directly or whatever, but I think things like that are life-changing experiences. And I think Lawson would agree that seeing these bears was sort of a life-changing experience. It opens you up to different things. But what are the odds of that happening? That's just incredible. So
And if we had gone in February, we could not have seen the bears because the bears get on the ice once the ice starts forming in Hudson Bay. So the only thing we would have seen if we had gone in February were the Northern Lights. And that's iffy all the time. So, you know, this way we got to see the bears, which really was the highlight of
Yeah.
the trip.
yeah,
And as well as a little bit of the Northern Lights. And Northern Lights are better in February because it's colder, like it might be -30 then instead of just -9. So that was another reason to go
yeah,
in,
we did. We did.
in November.
Yeah.
So the point of for us is that it's about how willing we are to see something, to hear something, to be part of something. You know, like, are we open to it? Are we available to
I think
it?
that's part of it, but, and I was certainly open to it. No
Right.
question there, but if that lady hadn't been there, I mean, it doesn't matter whether I'm open to it or not. I mean,
Right.
What are the chances? 2 weeks before that, I'd never heard of church. So, I mean, anyway.
I think she was an angel.
Yep.
I do too.
Works for
I
the
think we,
human.
and that's my point. I think we're all angels. Or can be angels at different points in time.
I think historically, the vision of angel wings could be that there was an appearance of someone as a messenger. And then boom, they're gone. You think they must have flown away.
Oh,
You know, another thing that connects with what I'm trying to say is that I think a term we use a lot, I do, I hear some, is it was a God thing.
Yeah,
And that's, to me, the same thing as angels.
I agree.
Or part of that whole story.
Just can't let this go by. For years, well, all my life I've been, I lose things, I always lose things. And I'm real scattered, if I all hadn't noticed. And so, is that funny there, Bert?
I wasn't, I was just looking at Laura.
It's okay.
Anyway, when I lose something, and you know, sometimes it's some little thing, doesn't matter, sometimes it's something important. I've lost millions of pairs of glasses and stuff. Anyway, I say I have learned that, and I don't know if it's an angel or if it's God, and I never thought about it being an angel. I've always just said it was God, but it doesn't matter. But I asked God to help me find it, and I'm telling you, I think it's 100% of the time. A week ago, I sold a painting, and they gave me a check here at church, and then I went and took Celie up to meet her mother, and used my debit card. And the next few days later, I couldn't find the check or the debit card. Both of those are pretty important, and we looked everywhere, and anyway, this morning I found them both in the same. I mean, it's been over a week, and I told Lawson last night, and she said, "We'll find it. You'll find that check." And I just knew. I had told Sharon I'll find it, but I had looked everywhere I need to look. And I have to tell one more. It's so quick. I'll make it quick. My daughter was looking for her house key. And I was on the phone with her, and she knows that I always ask God to help me find something. She said, "Well, you ask God to help me find my house key." And I said, "I will. And I want you to ask him too." And then in 2 seconds, she said, "I've looked everywhere and I really have to find it." And 2 seconds later, she must have been rushing around looking while we were talking. She said, "I think he overheard our conversation. I just found my house key."
What about St. Anthony?
Yeah, well, that's a good one.
St. Anthony's famous for finding often lost things.
I know, and I.
absolutely.
And
I did
I
too.
find things.
Sometimes I go to Jude, though.
Well, St.
Say it'll be
Jude is
impossible.
impossible.
You can't find
Lost
it.
causes.
Lost causes.
I've got to tell y'all something. When John was so sick, I know that there were angels all around me because I was taking care of him by myself, and I had to get him out of the bed, and I had to use one of those sling things and put him in the wheelchair. And there is no way that I could have done that by myself for 3 years. And I just asked the angels and God to help me. And my prayer was that I could take care of John by myself until, he died. And I always said to John that we were on an adventure together. And I know that there were angels helping me. And I believe in angels. And whenever somebody goes on a trip or leaves my house, I'll say, "Angels on your hood." And I know there have been times that I could have had a wreck and all of a sudden, the person stopped or I stopped or something. But there are angels, and there are some particular angels in that room.
Yes.
Amen. That angel looked like she was having a halo spinning around.
Yeah.
I thought it was the angel wings.
Well, we're gonna turn now to this specific angel Gabriel and the visit that this angel makes to a certain man, a priest at the temple. Zechariah. And this, if we look at any of the versions, that they don't change significantly from Bible to Bible. So he's coming because he's on duty. This is like his big day, right?
Honor.
It's an honor.
Yes.
He's going, he's in a long line of priests. He's been prepared. I mean, I think he's probably been before. I'm not saying that, but they chose, you're on a rotation and you chose, and it's a, yeah, there was, yeah. Right, right, right.
I thought he was surprised he was chosen.
So, right? But he's also then thinking about what it is he's supposed to be doing. Since this is an honor, this thing that he's trained for, that he's been a part of, this group of people, the priests that guard the temple and hold it sacred. This is, so think about something, a job you've had that you're very good at, that you've been waiting to show people how good you are at it. And then he kind of gets thrown off his game, doesn't he? I mean, somebody says, something appears to him, it's like, this isn't about what you're doing here. There's something else that's bigger than who you are and what you're doing. And I don't do well like that, right? I don't do well when I have a plan and I know what it is I'm going to be doing and I want to do it. And I think it's important to my ego for me to do it. I don't like it when somebody comes up next to me and says, hey, wait a second. God has a different idea for you. Then I might be disbelieving. I mean, I'm already put off my game. I'm just saying personally, that may not be you all. You all may respond differently to change and somebody else's interference in a way with some plan you had. But I think if we look back on other scripture that we know about angels, this happens all the time. When angels show up, this is not, let's think about Jacob. Let's think about our brother Jacob and his plan, his scheming, his conniving, his desire to have, to be the one. Whether that's about Esau, whether that's about his dad, whether that's about land or women or whatever Jacob had going on in his little head. And then angels show up and they wrestle and he sees them on the ladder and his whole trajectory changes for his life. His life is no longer the same. In fact, it's so different, he has a new name. So we know it's different. There's an outward. Right. So there was an outward and visible change in their behavior. So Zechariah, back to that, he's visited. And it says in the text that he was terrified and fear overwhelmed him. Are we at our best when we are terrified? When we feel overwhelmed by fear? Is that someplace where we're operating in our best way? No, not usually, right? That's that survival stuff kicks in, that fight, flight, freeze thing that we know about from psychology. That's what happens to us. We're not really our best selves at that moment. So we might say, well, why wouldn't he be excited? his wife, they haven't ever been able to have a child. This whole thing about this being able to pass on your genes was very important, is very important. Not maybe in our culture so much now, but in around the world, certainly it still is, and certainly at that time. And while I don't consider barrenness to be something as like punishment for sin, right? Like there's some
Apparently they did back in those days.
some folks did, right? Like blindness might be yeah, or sometimes it still is, right? What did I do? What haven't I done? Right? We can talk about that too. So that was not his first response though.
Well, he didn't believe because his wife was getting on in years.
Yes.
And
Right.
also, I mean, for the first time, this time when I read this, he may have been impotent from this point. So it was not only her barrenness, which has been the story for their whole
Right.
life, but now maybe he was impotent. So not only was she barren, but he was impotent. So that would be a reason to say, how can
That's why God sent Gabriel to talk to him.
You know, I really appreciate that reading of the text, Lawson, because we always put the emphasis on Elizabeth's barrenness.
Yeah.
Well, you know, in, excuse me, in Jewish culture, you're not technically Jewish unless your mother is Jewish, right? And so the line, if a woman is barren, then the line of her husband's family will stop in Jewishness. But that, it's not, I mean, I've done some reading on this, believe it or not, and it's not considered something is wrong, you know, something that you're bad and it's a sin or whatever. It was a sadness for her. You know, I mean, it was, and other people might have, you know, had the idea that she had done something wrong. But for her, I just felt really, really sad. And I think that she felt really sad. And if you read about the description, both of them came from very prestigious lines. She is from the line of Aaron, and that's a big deal in Judaism. And you know, and so that's going to stop. And he was from a very prestigious, from a priestly order, and so that's going to stop. So there's a lot of significance to her not having ever had a child. And it makes it even bigger if you think about it in the form of where they came from and what their genes had in them for, you know, for Judaism. So
Yeah, thank you. Well, the angel gives Zechariah this message, and it's not just that they're going to have a baby, but they're going to have a particular kind of baby.
Mhm.
And he already has a name.
And he already has a name. Right. It's not going to be Zechariah.
well, you know, and that was one thing, if I can just interrupt one more time, that I wrote down, because that's not right, when they were talking in there about how all the people, when he was having his bris, that everybody said, the rabbi says, what is his name? And everybody said it'll be Zechariah. Jewish people don't name children after their fathers. They name them after dead people. So, I mean, and that's always been that way. So I don't know why, unless it was the Greek version, was it in Luke that they said that?
Yes.
Okay, well then maybe it was the Greek version then, and that's why they didn't know. Matthew people wouldn't have said that because
Good point.
because those were Jewish people and they knew that they don't do that. The Greeks and Luke might not have known, so that they would think that's something that they would have done. But Jewish people, you can use initials or someone's but only if people have died. And so I wanted to make that note. I know, I thought it was important, but, okay, there you go. No more Jewish news.
Well,
It's
okay,
good,
but he
Kate.
didn't, the point
Thank you.
being, Zechariah doesn't get to choose the name. God has chosen the name. What do we know about that name, John? God is gracious. Yeah. And it tells about how he's going to behave, what he's going to do, what he's not going to do. He's not going to drink alcohol. He's and why is that? Well, this is another, we have a history of another visitation to another woman, right? If you remember Hannah's visitation, and then she pledged her child,
Was that
Samuel, to the temple, that he
Yeah.
would be a Nazarene, that he would not eat or drink or cut his hair, or that he would not spend his time doing what other people were doing, but doing things in service of God. So I think there's a strong connection.
I would think that a woman in any age, any time, would just want to date. You know, people
Can't hear.
say,
Oh, but she had gone a long time not being able to have one and was told she would have one, but she would give him up. She wouldn't be raising him. I mean, but it was for God's service that she let go of that lifelong need and desire. Yeah.
But she didn't totally,
Okay.
she,
She
he
was
had to be
able to.
weaned.
Yeah.
So he was about 3 at the
Okay.
time.
Okay.
And then each year she would bring him a new coat. So she lived close enough
That she
to-
could see.
that she could see him. And I bet she probably came more than once a year.
Yeah. yeah,
But,
okay.
you know,
That's
she
good.
would make him a new coat. So she did give him up though.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big sacrifice.
For the Lord.
All right. So that's the story, right? That's the scripture. That's what we know. And then it goes on to say that Elizabeth took herself away for 5 months. Different translations say different things. I mean, in the Message, it says, so this is how God acts to remedy my unfortunate condition. That's in the Message. Thus God has done to me in the days when he looked at me to take away my reproach among men. This is what the Lord has done for me when he looked favorably on me and took away the disgrace I have endured among my people. Those are several of the different ways that this has been written about. So there is some sense of it might have been disgraceful for her to be seen in public because she was an old woman. Or how would she, or you have to explain it. You know, the angel appeared to my husband and told him I was going to have a baby.
Somewhere I read that she relished the idea of it, and she didn't want to share it for a while, or maybe I misinterpreted that.
No,
but
I
it
think
was-
that's a fine
that
interpretation.
it was something that she delighted in
Yeah.
for months.
Well, the
before
Message
anyone did.
certainly leans more toward that understanding than some of the other ways that, so the New Revised Standard Version or the New Jerusalem Bible don't talk about it that way. I have a Bible here called the Inclusive Bible. The first egalitarian translation of scripture. It's now 15 years old. Okay, so it's not that new, but it says to her, sometime later, Elizabeth conceived. She went into seclusion for 5 months, saying, "Our God has done this for me. In these days, God has shown favor to us and taken away the disgrace of our having no children." So, a slightly different fascination for me about just what Elizabeth's posture was, even though it has very little to do with the angel's visit, but real interesting.
Something else too, maybe. Get pregnant.
Poor
They don't-
Laura.
They often, when modern women get pregnant, they don't immediately tell people, because if they miscarry in those early, they don't want the disappointment shared, and it. But something else I was wondering, if that culture felt, because women did miscarry early, that you needed to be quiet and still. I mean, now we know you need to keep active, but like it used to be when we'd have a cataract surgery, they'd keep you in. I know they kept my grandmother in bed with blocks on either side of her head so she would move it. And that's the worst thing you can do, because that would cause clots. But at that, back in time medically, people have felt like you need to be still after an injury, or maybe with a pregnancy. So maybe she was just trying to protect this pregnancy by being kind of still and not doing the normal things you do, lifting in the household to.
Or just processing, even when we receive information, how long does it take us to put that information into our daily life? How are we going to accommodate what we've just heard?
Yeah.
How does that happen? How long does it take?
Well, Joe always tells me that his grandmother, I mean, obviously he never knew when this was happening, but when she became pregnant, she never left the house till she had the baby. She never, for 9 months, and this is in Union Springs, Alabama, but she never went out of the house when she was pregnant. And he didn't know why. I mean, I guess it was, I don't know why, but that was just how they did that. So,
But Gary
Right.
talks about his grandmother, who wouldn't even say pregnant in mixed company. It was
Right.
almost painful. I mean, she
Yeah.
just not utter that word. And she'd say things like preggers or PG, but she could not, it was horrible. She could not say pregnant in mixed company. So maybe that was, maybe.
Even reds and.
I don't know. I mean, but it was
Yeah.
amazing. to me.
So we don't, there's some things we do know about culture, and there's some things we don't. I think for us then, since we're not scholars in that sense, where I have to go to is, how do I identify with this? What do I do when I receive information that seems unlikely or difficult? What do I do when I'm faced with some intervention by God? What is my reaction to that? Do I cherish it? Like we hear about Mary, keeping all these things, pondering them in her heart, like Elizabeth, going off and thanking God. Or, what is my response? How long does it take me to get there? Maybe it took Elizabeth 5 months.
Until Mary came to see her and met John jumped in her womb.
Right? Yes. All right.
That was
Okay.
wonderful.
Let's see where we are here in our time and space, because I can get really lost in this. Okay. I've asked you a lot of questions. If you look on the back couple of pages of this handout, we talked about finding holy spaces, and God's presence is one of the themes of this interchange between Zechariah and Angel Gabriel. And the example that I give is the one in Genesis that we talked about between Jacob. And the question I ask is, why do you believe there are certain times and places where people say they palpably feel God's presence? You remember what Jacob's response was he built an altar there, right? He wanted to remember that this is the place where this thing happened, where I had an experience of seeing, knowing God. And is it about time and space? Is it about attitude? Like, what is it for you when is it like some people say, I love to go to Ireland, or I love to go to Iona, or I like to go to the woods, or I go to my garden, right? Sometimes it's more, I just want to be quiet in myself. So are there, is it about, do all those things work together, perhaps? I just wanted you all to kind of think about that, just how true that's been for you. Sometimes people say that about going into the nave, right? Some women who do altar guild work talk about that space of it being a place of holiness and feeling God, closer to God in that space. So I'm wondering if anybody.
One of the morning meditations I read this morning online said something about, Advent is the time of waiting. We're waiting for God, but also God is waiting for us. And I think sometimes those two meet. So in other words, we recognize that we're waiting for God, and we recognize that God is there and he's been waiting for us. And when those meet, that's a time when we can really feel God's presence.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put that.
There's a song that says, it just says, this is holy ground. God is in this place, and so this ground is holy. He's given us holy, and then he's given us holy hands. He uses these hands, therefore they're holy, and it just makes me think about, this is holy ground. God is here, and I know that he's here, and it puts words to that, I guess.
Are there places where you felt God's presence strong?
What, Lake Logan?
Laura says Lake Logan, yeah, in the sanctuary,
Yes, they're all good.
yeah,
I've been to the big rock out there.
yes.
And I prayed, and my prayers were answered. In that spot, it's very- The big rock. The big rock at the end.
Right there near Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
Right beyond Jesus. Well, Jesus is a good place to pray. If you look in his eyes will sparkle back at you.
Yeah, there's a place to do that, absolutely.
I know that I had God's presence with me when I was sitting with my son Jeff as he was dying. And I know I told him, well, Jesus has come to get you. And I saw them leave. And it was a holy time and a gift to me to be there. And God was with me as my daughter, Deborah, Ellen's mother, was dying. And Ellen and her sister and her daddy and the other grandmother were there. And we all were praying, and we were with her as she left. It was another gift. And another gift is Ellen and I were right by Jack's bed as he breathed his last. And there was knowing God's presence was there and peace, that all of them were gone to heaven with God. And so no need for me to get hysterical because he's gone. He was in a good place.
And you had Alan there.
Amen.
Ellen, that's a good one. Yes. Ellen hung on to me and I hung on to her. But I was by myself with Jeff, but that was very sacred.
But you weren't by yourself.
No, I wasn't. I really wasn't.
And Ginger, you actually saw.
When
stuff.
Jeff left,
Yeah,
I
stuff like that.
actually saw a movement. It was like a cloud of smoke that went through the room.
So I'm guessing if you were Zechariah, you would have responded differently than I would have.
Well, I said, Jeff, Jesus is taking you home.
So that's the question then. If you were Zechariah, how would you have responded?
You're crazy.
Yeah, right.
I'm an old man. She's
Say
an
that again.
old lady.
Yeah.
Really?
Gabriel told Zechariah who he was and that he was standing with God. And I think if I saw a person who said,
God bless you.
sorry, who said it was an angel standing with God, receiving a message from God, I would have had to absolutely believe it.
Which makes you wonder if Gabriel did not have wings. Because if he had had wings and were obviously human, you know, but it makes you wonder if he looked
That-
like David.
Well, having the wings probably would have frightened you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you would have believed
Yeah.
a creature.
Well, I
that-
think Sarah's was the best, and it's one of my favorite lines in the Bible.
And which also makes you believe why some people had such a hard time thinking Jesus was the Messiah.
Because he just looked like it.
He looked like, and he looked like a normal Joe. He said, you know, there's one part in scripture where he says, you know, he was just, what was it? Not to be desired. I mean,
He was from Nazareth. Anything good come
Yeah,
out of
yeah.
it?
but, you know.
We
makes
can't,
you-
we can't hear or understand what anybody's saying.
Yes.
Okay, I just said, I wonder if Gabriel did not have wings, but just looked like a normal person, and that may have been why Zechariah didn't believe what he said.
Well, I never thought about Gabriel actually looking. I don't know. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
That way. I like Sarah's response the best though. That's one of my favorite lines in the Bible. Sarah laughed. I mean, what, if you know, supposedly she was hundreds of years old or 100 years old or whatever. And I mean, what would you do but laugh? I mean, like, are you kidding me? And so, I mean, I think I probably would have laughed. I probably would have just gone, whatever. I mean, it's like it's something that I don't know that you would ever, unless you'd had Ginger's experience, I guess, respond in any way other than, I can't imagine responding in any other way but that like Sarah did. Just laughing, because I mean, who believes that kind of thing is gonna.
Yes. Thank you. All right. And then, do you have another favorite angel appearance? Kate tells us her favorite is the angel and Sarah laughing. Do you have another angelic appearance from the either Old Testament or New Testament that that sticks out to you, like something that you really, when you think of an angel, it's what you think of? Mary, yeah.
When the shepherds were in the field.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why we need wings, because they were up in the sky.
Could be. Yep.
As Susan Robb points out, it's going to be disappointing to all of you to know that angels don't sing.
They speak, but
They speak, they don't sing. Somehow that's got.
And there were with the angels, the heavenly hosts, so maybe they were.
Maybe they were.
But they don't.
That's all the saints in heaven.
They may not always fly either. Yeah.
not a pleasant thought, but I think of the seraphim outside the gates of Eden, Garden of Eden, with the flaming sword,
Right.
barring Adam and Eve going back into the garden. That's certainly an angel thing, but
Mhm. No, that's
not,
that's
yeah.
that's a powerful one. Yeah, absolutely.
That's getting the message through.
Yeah. Any other ones that come to mind? I have a whole list here.
Well, tell us.
Cheat sheet.
I mean, some of them that we knew from before, the angel's appearance to Moses, you know, we could consider that
Burning bush.
in the burning bush, the angel's appearance to Jacob, the angel's appearance to Joshua. There's one. The angel's appearance to the women at the tomb.
Yep.
Yeah. The appearance to the disciples in the first chapter of Acts, to Philip in Acts 8, to Cornelius in Acts 10, the angel's appearance to Paul in Acts 27, and then the angel's announcement to the world in Revelation 14. So it's not like it's a one-off. I think that's the major point here. It's not a one-off for us. It's an over and over again kind of thing.
Well, and think of the appearances of angels since the Bible was written, of all the things that we don't know about,
Right.
you know? And I'm sure
But we've heard some here today.
we've
Yeah.
had our own
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah.
And we'll have more.
Yeah.
Keep our eyes at the open.
Susie, we just spent, can you hear me?
No,
We spent a couple of days with Daryl, and she tells about when Dick died, it was like an angelic, that something like Ginger,
Yeah.
knew when his spirit left, knew when his spirit left him,
Yeah.
that Jesus carried him away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how was God answering the prayer? We all think, how
Somebody
is
but
God
Laura should have to be
answering
whispering back and
prayers?
forth.
Could you say that one more time?
How is God answering the prayers of the people in the birth of John the Baptizer?
Didn't it say, didn't it, that what their prediction that Elijah would return when the Messiah came? I'm not sure about exactly what that prediction is, but Elijah was supposed to return again. I mean, that's at the Seder supper. The Jewish families have a seat for Elijah. So, and it says something that he would be in the spirit and the power of Elijah in this. So I think that means he is the herald of the Messiah.
The herald of the Messiah.
Came to prepare a way.
Yes. And so I think that's interesting to think that how God answers our prayers. That's what I wanted to, I think there's it's not just an angel, I don't think, to speak to Zechariah about a son to be born, just out of the ether. This is a culmination of prayer. This is a people praying for a Messiah. That, right? This is a
Yes.
people
yes,
asking for a Messiah and God's action in the world as a result of their prayers, or in response to their prayers, or coming along, like I preached about last week, coming alongside God's people. God comes alongside, and in this way, because I think as we know later about Jesus, did the advent of John the Baptizer assist in this understanding of the Messiah come among us? Yes, absolutely. We see that now. Looking back, we can see that. Without that, what would it have been different? Right? Without John the Baptizer, would it have been different?
Probably so.
yes.
Yeah. And I just was fascinated by this whole idea of not that I don't understand it, I just hadn't thought about it in the terms of God answering prayer. And that John the Baptizer would then go on to be a messenger in his own right,
He was.
right?
Well, that's what made me think about it differently, was comparing Zechariah to the entire Jewish nation, or the Jewish
Yeah.
people that were, I mean, I'd never thought about that before. And that always, those kind of things always make me go, because they do another one in there too, where it was a symbol, so to speak. And I was putting them, I wrote them down somewhere, but anyway, I did find that to be absolutely amazing, to put Zechariah as a symbol of the entire nation. And the people prayers were answered. Little did they know.
Little did they know. Little could they understand, maybe.
Right.
Right.
All right, well, the other part was this thing that we briefly touched on, this idea of spirit of barrenness. And maybe that isn't in terms of childbearing, but we have certainly all experienced spiritual barrenness, where we felt the absence of God, where we felt like we were being unproductive, uncreative, unable to produce something for God, right? This is not unusual, and is all part of our journey with God, is this spiritual barrenness. And we feel responsible for that. This is something we talked about just briefly, the cultural expectation, either to have children, but beyond that, I think when I'm not feeling in touch, either with myself or God or others, I do tend to blame myself for that. Or I tend to think I have done something, or I've fallen short, and I may have, but that doesn't leave much space then for God's omnipotent, ever-present power in my life. I've put myself in the center of that, and not, which is probably part of my spiritual barrenness, right? I've moved myself into being God, and therefore there's not any room for God. But how God comes into our spiritual barrenness, even when we think we're beyond redemption, or a situation is beyond redemption, right? This is how many have we faced all of these? Every one of us has faced that circumstance where we thought something is beyond our control, and we feel hopeless, and we feel helpless about that. Well, I hope that this message, that this angel brought, is a message for you as well in those times, to recall that God answers prayer in particular ways. God sends messengers into our lives to deal with our spiritual barrenness, even when things seem beyond ability. Elizabeth and Zechariah were beyond childbearing years. Beyond that, that's part of the story. And if you take it to what Kate said, as a nation, as a people, as Israelites, feeling like they are out beyond God's reach, that God is not listening to them, they are not being heard. There is no, you see, they're living under oppression. They're trying to operate in a system that there's no win. They have to appease Rome in order to exist. And then in appeasing Rome, they are no longer receptive to the people's needs to whom they serve. So they're in the middle. Zechariah is in the middle of that as a priest and as a part of that authority. And so that would seem almost hopeless. I mean, that's worse than being a Democrat. I don't know.
There's nothing better than that.
No, I don't mean being one. I mean being one, and then being in a system where you feel like it's hopeless. That's what I meant. That's what I meant. Not carrying that with you, but in the circumstances around it. So I think that it brings great hope. And if we are waiting in Advent for some great hope, this is a beautiful, not just example, because we can get into like, oh, I can point to that, but yet can we internalize it? I think we can all point to things. I think we can all look at things, but can we internalize that message of hope? Can
We'll
we?
see next week.
We'll see next week. We're gonna read, I want you to read up about, and if you have different translations, that would be awesome, but to read up on next week, we're doing Mary. So it's the angel coming to Mary. And the angel goes beyond just what happened to Elizabeth, because the angel, when the angel comes upon Mary, it also makes her, right, it delivers the news that she will be pregnant with God's child. So it goes beyond, the paternity changes slightly in this story.
Pretty big
And if we're
news.
uncomfortable talking about pregnancy, we might have to brush up. We might have to brush up for next week. So there'll be, so read through some of it. I didn't get to a lot of these questions in here. It might be helpful for you or interesting. And if nothing else, just read the text, right? Like if nothing else, if you don't read the book, just read Luke, whatever it is for next week. It's, okay. Just read Luke 1:26 through 38. Luke 1:26 through 38. If you get nothing else done, just read that. And then we'll come back next Thursday at 10 o'clock
Yeah.
and share some more of your insights and ideas, and also what God has, maybe what visitations you might have had since then.
Hallelujah.
Go in peace.
Hallelujah. That's right.
Thank you all.
Bye, guys.